it's crazy because sometimes I get on myself of like, oh man, like you're just sitting there in front of a camera talking for this video. You need to fix that. But like, you're the kind of living proof like that. Like not all your videos have graphics, you know, and just like, but it's about what you're talking about. It's not like no one cares that you're talking to the camera for 10 minutes. It's what you're talking about.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I am your host, Circa. Corinne is out on tour in London right now, so I've been doing this guest interview series with some people that I've been paying attention to in this space. And one such guest is a man who I've been watching his YouTube channel ever since we started our YouTube channel. And it's been really cool to like get his perspective on so many different things, from music branding to just artist career guidance and music business. And some of you probably already know this gentleman. For those of you who don't, you definitely got to check him out. But please welcome BrandMan Sean. How's it going, man?
Good, man. Appreciate you having me, Circa.
Absolutely, man. So I first came into your channel because a gentleman in my office, a younger dude in the hip hop space, like he had been helping us sort of like find other channels that like, you know, that are doing something similar to what we're trying to do, that we could sort of like look at what they're doing, see how they engage with their audience and just get to know them. And you were like one of the first channels that he followed. And I started seeing your videos pop up on my feed and stuff. And yeah, I've just been super curious about it ever since I started seeing your content. But maybe for those of you like out there who don't know who you are, could you just give us like a brief primer on what you do?
Well, so publicly, I guess you could say the web persona name is BrandMan Sean, and I do marketing and brand strategy. I keep myself to those simple things, but I do them across multiple industries. I started off in the tech industry. When I was in tech, I didn't start off as marketing and branding. I actually evolved that from, I started off as like computer programming when I initially got into it, but marketing, branding, and my big entry, my official entry into music was actually through a music festival. I had been helping artists and all that stuff beforehand, but it wasn't until I got into my own music festival and actually owning something that I started to take things seriously and elevate my platform. So it started there, but since then have worked with artists from, hey, I just started a few months ago, all the way to, hey, we're on the charts somewhere and we're moving, and that's been all around the world. And that's kind of mostly because of YouTube, right? That kind of opened up a lot of opportunities outside of Atlanta, which is where I'm usually based.
That's awesome, man. So yeah, that's tracks very closely with my journey. Like I started off marketing for like technology companies and applications, and I just like I was like in that music space working at a studio. So like naturally people started kind of tugging my shirt about helping them with their launches and stuff. So is that kind of what happened with you? Like you were working in this space, but you had friends in the music space?
Yeah. So like even going back to college, freshman year of college, like my roommates it was a bassist who wanted to be like Barry Gordy, a producer who was also a saxophonist, a keyboard player who was also a songwriter, and all of them are doing some version of that still to this day. Well, no, actually one stopped and he's teaching, but they're all doing that to this day, and they initially forced me into it. Music was just something I loved, but so they forced me into it kind of through rap and being a rapper for maybe like 8 months. I never really wanted to be a rapper, but you know, I did that for about 8 months. And then from that on, still just so many of my friends, so many people that I'm around, even my brother, I watched him. He's 7 years older than me, and he had been and had success and saw some ups and downs. As a matter of fact, he helped me. I always say he helped me get through some of the BS faster from a perspective of I saw him I remember one day calling him, and I forgot how I found out, but he had worked on a Grammy nominated project, did some work with Lecrae, whatever that project, something like
Wow,
that.
I know. I'm buddies with one of Lecrae's managers over at Red Light.
Really?
Or at least I think so. Yeah. It's interesting to hear his name pop up because I had never heard of him before, and then like my buddy told me about him, and I was like, wow, this is huge.
Yeah. So exactly, and it was funny because the way me and my brother relationship is, it was just like he's my brother, and I had nothing to do with what he was doing in the industry. Really didn't know half of the things he was doing. And it was funny because even when I heard the name, I was like, hold up, and I saw the project. Then I realized those were a whole bunch of the flyers that I was seeing around Georgia State at that time, or from some months before. So I was like, oh snap, I saw this. And so, but him saying that he had this like Grammy and worked on this type of project, but me knowing where my brother's life was, right, being his actual brother at that time, right, I would have had no idea he had any kind of success, right? So that was like first, I was just like, coming from the like logical thinking background, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So this industry is different than I think. Like that was before I was even serious about it, or trying to get into it. And then they've won other types of awards and things like that. But that was I had that mix of experiences of just being around people who are doing it, and then being able to from afar have a few things click and see that, until eventually, especially when my festival started to take off, it just became more and more serious because we essentially marketed beforehand really early on, where the way a lot of artists market themselves. I marketed the festival as if it was an artist, and I memed the festival essentially, and we built it out to 1,000 people with pretty much zero marketing dollars spent. Albeit I didn't have to pay a marketer because I was doing so much of the content myself. Right, I ended up having a lot of time on my hands after I decided to quit a job, and then also Instagram was completely different at the time. We hacked based on how it worked chronologically and so many other factors. I couldn't repeat it by marketing the exact same way. I would have to think through how I would do it at that time. But that's so much of today, right? It's always a window to figure out that window, and then you got to keep learning and figure out the next window.
I totally vibe with that. I vibe with multiple things that you said. One is that at first, it's awesome that you got your experience through a festival, and it's awesome that you've had a festival with 1,000 attendees. Like I remember when Rolling Loud was like first getting started down here in Florida, and like we had a lot of the artists, the guys behind Rolling Loud were also trying to push artists. And like this was back when Wi-Fi's Funeral was still new. Like all these artists that came out of Florida were still new, and they just had like 1,000 attendee festival in Rolling Loud, and it's grown so much since then. So that's definitely a good place to be in, especially these days.
Well, I have some drawbacks about the festival industry as well, but
I would love to hear those.
All right, so one of the reasons when I got into that, I didn't initially plan it to be a full-on festival. I kind of actually was working with my homies who wanted to be artists in their collective. I was the only person who didn't want to be seen. Right, everybody. There was all these different front-facing brands, except for me. I didn't care, and I threw the festival almost as a bigger event, a better way to market them initially. But they didn't have their stuff together first time around. Everybody's inexperienced, cool in that regard. But as the festival was super dope and people wanted me to bring it back, now I'm like, this might be an actual business. But now I instantly start to go look at the business and understand it as a whole. So you got to remember, I'm coming from a tech background, and I'm like, I'm not the most people person. I'm more introverted, really. There's low margins. Festivals are low margins, right? In comparison to especially looking at tech, where you can have something like WhatsApp have 19 or 50 employees and sell for 19 billion. Not that that's the most common thing in the world, but you understand the difference of margin and scale, which is what I was used to now I'm dealing with hundreds of people, all these kind of risk and things like that. This is just a personal thing for me. And the margin wasn't great. I was profitable from the very beginning because I didn't know any other way. To me, it's just like you're running a business or doing the kind of event, you have to profit. I learned after, as it started to grow, and a lot of grimy stuff started to happen, and festivals started to see us as a threat, which I didn't even understand why at that period of time. To me, it's just like, I don't know. I didn't understand why at the time. So I didn't know things like most of these festivals had investors behind them and a lot of money behind them. I did not, because I had my money and my homeboy who was working at Domino's, and my other homeboy was a valet, right? And then also even looking at bigger festivals, when we look at all the way to Tomorrow World and all these things, right? Still smaller margins in comparison to a lot of other products. However, it's just on a far bigger scale, but that's a lot of different moving pieces to move with. So to me, that was why I eventually stopped doing it, because it takes so much effort, and for it to not be my main business, the margin small. I believe the industry is just becoming more and more saturated. I watched the bubble happen in Europe, and so many people are doing these festivals and events, and then regular parties and events are starting to be called festivals, and differentiation is becoming more and more difficult. And so many people fund their festivals with sponsors, and I'm looking at bigger festivals that are far more established that still have trouble getting sponsors. So there's so many things business model wise that I didn't necessarily appreciate about it, unless I wanted to dedicate myself to it, and I wasn't prepared to do that. And the one thing I did where I said, well, for two reasons, I kept it inside. One, for an experience reason. I was serious about immersive. For me, the festival is my artistic canvas where I was able to express my creativity, because usually I'm helping other people express theirs. And it was an immersive music festival, indoor music festival, 10 rooms. Every single room felt like a different vibe. Downstairs, basement rave party, upstairs glow party. This side, in this other room feels like a fancy art gallery. This other one has, I don't know, grass on the floor. It feels like outside, but it's inside. All this kind of stuff. And artists that perform to that aesthetic all in one place. So one, being inside allowed me to control the environment and go more in depth. It's expensive as fuck. Well, I don't know if I could curse on this. So it's
You
very
totally
expensive.
can. We do
cool.
all the time.
Cool. It's definitely expensive to control environment outside, right? Far easier doing the inside. But two, if I just really increase demand and buzz, eventually I can just increase margin, because I'm not going to be able to expand too much. Of course, I can get bigger buildings, but there's still a limitation where I can just get used to running the same event in some form or facet, so overhead stays somewhat fixed. I was huge on not building it on artists, building it on the event itself, because that artist is an entirely different dynamic. So artists worked as marketing for the festival, and you come, but you experience the festival, and now you don't care if that artist is there next time. And as it builds out, and that margin starts to grow, because now more people want to come. It's a hotter event, and we can charge more without having to deal with a massive amount of more real estate. It allowed me to move and do what I did, but still, once again, just the amount of effort festivals take, and just where I see the industry overall in terms of, one, the margin, two, the saturation. It's and that's just my opinion, especially if you're not going to be committed to it. And I like to do things like to a T. I can be pretty neurotic about things, especially if it's my creativity, right?
Right.
So that's just an overview of how I feel about festivals. I know a lengthy overview.
I wouldn't want to be involved in the festival business either. That's kind of the trend in the music industry, though. Like, I was just talking to my friends the other day, or literally actually today, and we were talking about like Spotify, and my friend brought up like, how come, like, think about how many times people say Spotify like online when they could have said Apple Music, and they just don't say Apple Music. And I'm like, yeah, because like, Apple, and he was like, it's probably not going to be that way in 2 years. I was like, I don't know if that's true, because I don't know if Apple gives a fuck about Apple Music. Like, why would they care? They make so much money. Why would they care about the music industry,
Wait, if who? Oh, Apple, the company? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Like, they do $1 trillion in cash. Like, they probably look at the music industry as like an annoying like side thing that they have to maintain, because it's how they built the iPod,
Exactly. I think there's probably some people there that do that. I can't say, because I know Steve Jobs wasn't he didn't do everything, right? The one person can only do but so much. But I
Yeah,
think one of his biggest insights was understanding that intersection of the art and the design and the tech and how that worked.
totally.
And I think there's at least some understanding of the impact of culture and tech and what that did for the company, but I don't know how deep that is, and I don't. So that would be interesting to see, because when leadership changes, and I mean, that can, yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I don't think they take it as seriously. I'm on your side. I think they know that it's a thing, and we want to handle this thing, but they don't address it as, all right, this matters and we need to make this a priority in my
It's just
eyes.
never gonna, like, like, for I imagine they're looking at it like, well, why would we want to be in Spotify's position? They're not profitable. We're a very profitable company.
Yeah.
Why, like, why devote resources to something that no one's even figured out a profitable business model for yet?
That's true. I keep forgetting about the profitability standpoint, and then having to still deal with all the record labels and things like that. I think record labels, not Spotify necessarily, but I feel like record labels will be threatened pretty heavy over the next 5 to 10 years, as companies like TikTok try to figure it out and continue to try to figure out their own ways to have their own makeshift label or artist development type issues. I'm seeing some things like that, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Some record labels, all they have right now is that legacy asset of the IP. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's a pretty crazy time, man. Everything's in flux. One thing before we start talking industry, I did want to ask, like, how did you get into YouTube? Like, what's that trajectory?
Oh man. So YouTube started simply from downtime. I I was working that festival, and which really came from the trying to get the homies on, and then the homies weren't taking it seriously enough, and they also had their own artistic, like, ups and downs, where, hey, I got to take time and kind of figure this out. Some people just have to, like, work and get money at the time. So I'm like, you know what? I've spent a long period of time at this point just working on other people. Let me figure out something I could do for myself. But when I said do for myself, it wasn't like work, but just like something that I care about, work on something that I care about. And
Right.
that YouTube wasn't my initial, this is something I care about. Initially, in that downtime, I just still had people asking me questions. And I was like, look, man, I'm answering these same questions over and over again. So let me do like a few videos, and I could just send the people the link of the video. Like, I've talked about it here. Check it out. Here's the breakdown.
Right.
So it started that way, but I was getting good feedback when I dropped those initial videos, and I had a whole series. So it was like this other portion of creativity that kind of kicked in, where when I came up with the first video, I started to see these other video ideas that I just thought would be cool. It was about 10 of them. And once I dropped all those, I wanted to make sure it got views, because I've done stuff before where I've just done it. That was almost why I kind of got into marketing in the first place. I used to be very like just craft and art, where I just do stuff, and then when it's done, I would be done with it. I didn't even have a goal or think about it being seen. And eventually I was like, I'm tired of working on stuff that doesn't get seen. So let me do the business stuff that I do and focus on this marketing side to do it to my own stuff. So I kind of had a little marketing plan of having my friends promote the first few episodes in the same way we promoted the music videos. Got really great feedback. And from there, I was like, you know what? I have this time. This could be my thing of working on myself. And I committed 1 year to it. I said if I had 1,000 followers after a year, I would reconsider of like, I'll stop, because I'm all right. I'm big on discipline and creating insurance, like systems as insurance for my own bullshit. So I told myself that I'm going to post at least 2 times a week, no matter what, because creating videos, you can really just like creating a song, right? You can delay it and say, this isn't perfect. And I didn't want it to be that way. And I didn't want, like, I hated that overthinking that I had started to do or caring about what I look. That's why I always wear a black shirt. Like, all those little things that would just stop me. Don't worry about the haircut. I got crazy hair in some of the earlier videos and quality, whatever. So I said, post at least twice a week, no matter what. And then at the end of the year, hopefully I have 1,000 followers, see what happens. And that was like my self-discipline exercise. And then that happened. I had more than 1,000, either somewhere between 20 or 30,000. I can't remember whatever the number was. But
That's awesome.
But yeah, so now I was like, okay. There's a thing. I hadn't thought about any of the other stuff of YouTube until like much later, to a point that part of why I stopped in a period outside of dealing with a lot of life shit at the time was because of the part where I was like, yo, like, I'm the kind of person, like, I'm always like, bro, I don't want people to be like, I don't want to be famous. I'm not like in that kind of way, or I don't really like to be known. I'm walking around and someone's like, yo, what's up? And I'm like, whoa, who are you? Like, that was just a weird thing to me. And I was like, well, literally posting more videos will only create more of this. This doesn't make sense if you don't want this. So I had to kind of go through a period of even figuring out what was the purpose of doing it. But that's how, like, almost instantly I started my YouTube channel, not thinking about where I was going with it, just kind of having fun. But, you know, obviously I'm where I'm at now. I figured out and what I wanted to do with things.
That's awesome. So you took a hiatus because you like needed to cool off after all that growth and then came back to it?
Yeah. So, all right. It's crazy. The more specific story, and I actually told this, I was talking to Ruslan on one of his interviews, and but I didn't get into this much detail. I'll say this part, like, on the first day of, this is probably 2017, maybe it was 2018. No, it was only a year. So 2018, I was at this event with like family and friends, and it was like this circle thing, New Year's start, like, what are you thankful for? And I was talking about like all the success and just all these things that are happening that are really dope in my life. And like, just no complaints. And then literally 2 weeks later, I was actually going to New York to interview Ryan Leslie. And before that morning, before I got on a plane, I don't know, like, I just got this extreme bout of anxiety. But at that time, I didn't even know what the fuck anxiety was. So I was feeling all of that shit and not knowing like what that was. And it was just weird. Kind of pushed through that in my own weird way. And so like handling that, and then I had all this stuff, family, like 3 people passing like within a few weeks, none of them related. So all of them kind of unexpected to me, and then still having to carry the festival on my back because I wasn't really building the team out to scale. So I was doing too much. And then the channel, like, it was so many things. And I was still in the tech world at the time, like doing stuff almost equally. I hadn't decided that I was really going to focus on this music thing completely. I was just doing good at helping people. So I just had to take a step back for so many reasons. Because I'm stretching myself thin. I'm going through this weird thing that I've never heard of before, or I never understood. It was like, the first time I had a fever, I used to think people who had fevers, like, to be so debilitated, were soft, until I finally got a fever. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. I got to stay home. I'll just read. And then I couldn't even read. I was like, yo, this thing is serious. So that was like what anxiety was for me. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what they're talking about. This shit's weird. So like, going through all that, it kind of forced me to stop. And then one of the thoughts for the channel was that, and of course, seeing some of like just the weird stuff that the music industry has to offer, that doesn't really sit well with me. And yeah, so I'd say it all came to surface after about 4 months of that, because I didn't have the opportunity to let any of that process, because I had a job to do. I was leading the festival, everything was announced, and people were relying on me, and I kind of just pushed through it. And so after that happened, I was like, all right, let's chill. Didn't know if I was ever going to do the channel ever again. And yeah, but then eventually I cut off a lot of things, including the festival and so many other things that weren't necessarily bad things at all. But it was just like, I got to be more intentional about what I do. And the channel was the one thing that ended up lasting in the long run.
That's awesome, man. Well, like, it's definitely cool to watch the channel. Like, what I love about it is that like you are using, you know, more candid gear to like film your stuff, like just getting it out there. And what we like constantly talk about is that like doesn't really matter if you have high quality or low quality. It matters like frequency, content, quality of information or entertainment. But like video quality is like way down there. Like you can enhance quality of entertainment maybe with like crazy video work. But like we tell musicians, like just like set up and start talking about something that resonates with you and you'll find people. Like you need to just do it every week. You need to have it on a schedule. And like you're living proof. Like you're just like, I'm going to do 2 videos a week and we'll see what happens after a year. Yep. And you beat your expectations. That's so cool.
Yeah, you're spot on with that quality thing, man. Because my first videos were like not even screen share. I was like, well, yeah, screen share in a PowerPoint, horrible quality. I didn't even know it at that time. Then when I switched to my face, because I was just experimenting, and then people were like, oh, we like this. Didn't really think through that fully, obviously, at that time. But like I was like, okay, shoot, this is working. I did that. And that was horrible quality until I finally realized that it didn't take long. I didn't need a new lens. I just needed to understand my camera settings and switch that up a little bit. But people still, I knew one thing though. I was like, in my demographic, what I was doing, all right, so artists have to find their own version of it. The thing that matters most was the information as far as what I wanted, because I wasn't doing it just to blow up, right? It's like the people who care about this information and the people like who aren't just looking for the bells and whistles, like the real people that you want to connect with, they'll care about the information first. And if you give the right value, then they won't care. Okay, yeah, it would be nice if it could be perfect audio and look great. But if the information is there and it's working, then they'll sit through it and kind of, you know, take the pain. And that turned out to be true long term, right?
Yeah, I mean, like this company started with like a webcam, you know, and like an awful laptop. And you know, like it's just like I think that's so true, is that like what matters is that you get started, and that when you're in front of the whatever camera and whatever lens, like as long as you are engaged in what you're talking about, and it's something you care about, I think like anyone else who cares about it is going to dig it regardless of like whatever the setup is. And like, it's crazy because sometimes I get on myself of like, oh man, like you're just sitting there in front of a camera talking for this video. You need to fix that. But like, you're the kind of living proof like that. Like not all your videos have graphics, you know, and just but it's about what you're talking about. It's not like no one cares that you're talking to the camera for 10 minutes. It's what you're talking about.
Especially the right people, like, you know what I mean? That like when we think about core audience, you can always add the other stuff later, but the core, whatever your core audience is, if you have that deep content, if that's what you know, the type of artist you have with the message and all that stuff, or if you are like good at presenting certain concepts or certain visuals, whatever your main thing is, right? Like, yeah, as long as you can package that part correct and not over package and try to be perfect, yeah, no one's going to care, man. I still get people, I'll see a comment on my channel and it'll be like, oh man, the audio's horrible. And I'm like, oh shit, man, I thought my stuff was good. And then I'll go in and realize the video will be like from 2 years ago. And I'm like, asshole, look, like, have you not seen all the videos I've done since then? Like at least update yourself. But it's there. It's the bad quality is still there. No one cared then, and it's always a reminder. It's kind of a cool reminder that, like, look, it wasn't always great, but I'm doing it. You know?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just cool to watch, and like I definitely get a lot of inspiration from your videos, but also in terms of like guiding musicians on what to do. It's like you need to be putting out a library of content like every week. You need to be like on that recurring content, because not only are you going to get better, the content's going to get better, the audience is going to grow, new audience is going to come in, they're going to look at the old stuff. And so much of that is like relevant. I think like, and musicians don't really know like what's okay for content. Like a lot of times I'll be like, I'll go through like a musician's available footage or stuff that they've gotten, or ask them questions like, have you ever captured footage or, you know, recorded audio from these things? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, okay, put that out. You know, like they don't know what's okay as content. And I think everyone's got like a way too high barometer for what is passable like as like a recurring content piece for their audience to check out. And that's mostly what we're doing is like kind of bringing them down and being like, look, what can you create every week? Because what matters is that you're creating and releasing something every week, you know?
Yeah, that's huge. So what is your perspective when it comes to, I don't know, a musician posting too much, or the primary types of content when they're posting, let's say, a lot of behind the scenes and things like that, when they don't necessarily have an audience that cares too much? Do you try to stagger it or make it something overly creative, or you just say, hey, go, and then we work on more so you're getting the music heard in the meantime?
So we like generally when we're working with a client account in our agency, we, you know, it's like, are we getting a new in stream of new listeners? And we typically use Facebook ads for that. So like, it's like, okay, crank on the new listeners. Now you need content every week because they're always coming in. They're always looking for something to grab onto. And if you have a vault of stuff for them to check out the second they realize they love your music, then they're going to stay, you know, like this is so huge.
Yep.
But definitely not like, you know, if you have no new fan generation going on, yeah, it doesn't make sense to be putting out a whole lot of content, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just wanted to see what your perspective was on that, because what I realized, you know, especially being on YouTube, sometimes it would lead me deeper down certain rabbit holes, just like answering certain questions of people or recommendations, but then not realizing the context that needs to be added until I'm deep down that hole. So
that makes so much sense.
Yeah, like, so you'll be like, oh, do this to grow your social, do this, or your social should be like that. And then eventually I was like, wait, hold up. Like, actually get more fans. Let's get back to the actual music. You know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a foregone conclusion for us. It's definitely something I got to check. Talking to like, especially like, you know, just a broader audience, is that like our foregone conclusion is that people are already generating new fans with like video ads or something like that.
Right.
You know, which is definitely not every artist. But yeah, man. So like, tell me a little bit about some of the main the main categories of questions you receive from artists, or your main like domains of expertise that you feel like you've developed sort of like a model for.
Okay. One is just branding and that content strategy or around branding as a whole. It's hard to really, in terms of the branding, to give a specific model, because some of it I do still feel like is I need to create more model that I can just tell other people versus running people through my process and being personally like kind of using I guess you could say talent, but you know, those things are still intuitive to you, but you don't know how to explain yet. I do still have a little bit too much of that, I feel like, when it comes to my branding, the way I deal with certain clients, because they're usually on a different level a lot of times. But one thing I can say is, when it comes to branding, there's these 5 parts to the brand DNA. Sometimes I forget 1 or 2 or the order, but we can talk about the purpose, the promise, the values, the expression, and the expression is more like it could be the audio, right? The visuals. It's the more dynamic one, and I'm missing one of them right now. But personality, I think that's the one that I missed out on. And the point of those, though, or me ever talking about them, is there's multiple facets of a brand and different ways to approach brand, but you only need 1 or 2 of them to really spearhead. And artists focus on too many. Oh, okay, what's my personality going to be like? What's my music and what's it going to sound like? And do I have this huge message? What are my visuals? Right? They're focusing on far too many, particularly for the artist from the beginning, right? That's the more conversation that I have to get with the artist at the beginning. It's focus, focus, focus. So so many of these artists that you see that get to a certain level, they have something that they're leading with. Even if they have other things that layers they've peeled back that reinforce their brand, you'll have, you know, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, they led with music. Yes, people kind of gravitate towards his personality or some of the artsiness and visuals and some things like that they do, but they led with music, right? That's a part of that brand, and then they reinforce with some other things. You have people like Cardi B who led with personality, and then she reinforced with with other things, right? There's always going to be one, maximum two, as far as their primary things that they get known for on a more universal level, and then the other, the fans and people who already care about them, they'll appreciate them more based on the other layers that fall up under that. So that's one thing when it comes just to branding and that conversation, helping artists build out that focus in general.
Right.
And that can be very contextual to who the artist is, because those are different choices. And then when it comes to marketing, which I stem from branding, it's hard for me to do much work with artists outside of me already getting to work with the capacity or understanding their brand, because I'm always thinking from that standpoint. So I don't do like very specific playlist promotions or things like that, or people who might be wondering something like that. At this point, I focus on the strategy more influencer model. I will do some YouTube and Facebook ads. I run those steadily, but right now I've been blessed to now be able to be more in a point where I can focus on the things that I want to look at long term. So I'm very that brand in that way, and then I'll have specific campaigns where it might be you become a meme of some sort, or this song becomes a meme of some sort from a PR influencer standpoint, or actually getting to helping them create and formulate music videos based on the brand, but doing it in a way that is effective and still a narrative, not like viral from the standpoint of it has to be, like, what viral videos and people have those expectations, but having moments of impact based on your brand, because that's where I want to go long term. I want my creative work and to use more of my creative side versus my science side when it comes to music specifically. So I think I answered that question. I actually haven't talked to people much about that, so I appreciate you asking me that question, because it's going to force me to now refine how I communicate it to people.
Totally, yeah. Like, I was just wondering, because I know, like, from watching your videos, I get the sense that you are like a lane historian. Like, you always are documenting what's like artists' lanes in are, like, as they're happening, and you're watching come ups and you're like dissecting them, either like after they've happened or while they're happening.
Right.
And like, that's a totally different view of it. Like, we're like, obviously we focus a lot on like models and like, like systems and stuff like that. But there's something to, especially when you talk about like the major label record industry, there's always like a unique way in. Like, it's not like you can just replicate the success of others. Everyone's always had this, like, you know what I mean? Like, especially in hip hop as well. Like, in hip hop, everyone's come up is completely unique to them,
Yeah, that's super real. And it's funny you say that, because that does. So one thing when you say that, I think about the fact that I'm in love with behavior, right? And it started with more of the tech thing and that user experience type, and what that does. And I apply that from everything. So in the same way with the festival, and I talked so much about experience, that was all from a user experience standpoint. What they see when they walk in, like even giving them a specific type of band. So when you now wake up the day after or two, you might want to keep the band longer, and you actually remember where you were, and you see somebody else with this band. Like all those things, I'm very user experience, behavior, and community based. And that's what I watch. And that's what I think intrigues me about watching the come up and finding those spaces, because it forces me to say, all right, what do they like about him? What are people actually saying? What's the actual feedback versus these plans that we create in our head? Like I always say, like, the game isn't won in the huddle, it's won like on the field when you're calling the audibles. Like, what happens once the defensive lineman changes his footing, the linebacker decides they're about to blitz, and you're like, okay, this looks different than I thought it was going to look. And that's so much of marketing, and people don't speak enough on that, I feel like. Putting some shit out there with enough infrastructure to get feedback, and then double down on what you see. That's what, at least where I come from, you know what I mean? Now, if you're dealing with from a big, slow corporate scale, of course, it takes. You have to do a little less of that. You still win today if you invest in building your own system to do that dynamically, which I think is why you see QCs and so many of these indie labels be able to still do what they do, right? With take corporate money, but build a indie-like system, right, under it. That's where I feel like the game is going, particularly in this era where we have so much ability for user feedback in a short period of time.
Yeah, definitely. I also think that like with music as opposed to like with business marketing, it's especially true that like with business marketing, and I've done a lot of that in my career, is like, you know, are you an e-commerce business? You sell a product between $20 and $50. All right, here's your playbook. You know, like we already know what works there. It doesn't matter what, you know, your target audience is necessarily. Like certain strategies might work over others, but ultimately, if you're this type of business, you know, oh, you're e-commerce, oh, you're info products, you know, like there's a playbook. People have already laid down that ground for you to walk on. But with musicians, so there's so many variables to like, what's your genre? Like, you know, like males or females of what age and what race are in the band? What kind of music do you make? What instruments do you play? What has happened in music this year? Like, there's just so much that goes into whether an artist is going to be able to find a fan base and how they do it, that I think you're right. Like, it's so hard to say, just do this thing. We have a few things that we like are go-to for us, but in that there's a lot of nuance. It's like, one of the big things is like, you know, indies will ask us like, what do I do? What do I offer to get email subscribers? And it's like, well, that's not a question that I can answer for you. Like you're going to have to test a million different things until you find something that like all your fans are like, oh my God, I want that. And it's like, okay, great. Now you have a way to get them. But it's like, you know, like it's a case by case basis. And I think especially in music, that's like always true.
Yeah, man. It's funny because I struggle with myself. Sometimes it's like, not really feeling lesser than, but sometimes I'm like just joking, like, up here we go again, because the constant in marketing, more often than the people asking for advice would like to hear, the answer is often just testing, experiment. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't have the time to do the testing for you, right? I can say, hey, try this direction, but hey, if what I said is not working, then you want to try something else. Like, why don't you try these two things? And or sometimes people will tell me, all right, yeah, this is working, and they'll be showing me so much progress. And what should I do? It's like, yo, do more of that. Like, this just started working, you know, or I just tried this and it's not working when I did it 2 times. Well, in my mind, you almost didn't try it yet, you know?
Yeah, I think like what's more important is that musicians know like how to test strategies rather than like which strategy to go with, you know?
Bingo, man. Like, that's the biggest difference. And I think when we get that and we're like, cause you teach as well through your channel and push that out so much heavily. You have the courses and all that stuff too. And I think, and to me, from what I've everything I've seen from you, right? You're not out here. You actually care, right, about the people getting it, even if they're not working with you long term, right? But the thing that I discovered after so much dealing with artists is underestimating people's mentality, which goes into different directions. One, that mentality of, all right, I want somebody else to kind of save me or give me all of the answers, right? And that's not a thing, right? I'm not going to sign you and put you on this big platform like it's not 1990. And 2, I'm not going to be able to in 1 hour tell you everything to do that's going to change your life completely. So it's like the biggest thing is when we can get them comfortable with just accepting, like, for one, if it's just through the channel, right? Like accepting the many frameworks I give them, or the frameworks that you give them of thinking, for them to say, all right, this is additional way to look at it. And now let me analyze it from this direction. And let me analyze it from this direction. And now make a more logical decision for myself based on the information I have versus, yo, this strategy is the one, or understanding, like you said, how to test. All right, once I'm able to even think about the problems in that way versus this one is the definite work or this one is the definite work, now I have to have the ability, like testing it. There's some ups and downs in testing. Oh, I'm not getting the results immediately, but you have to have a patience, right? And getting used to that process of what that looks and feels like. And like, there's so much to that alone of just knowing how to do that, knowing how to research, right? How many times have someone probably asked you a question that they could simply Google, right, and find valid information, and or where they're like, you know, and understanding the difference between like data that's on the front end, right? Like this is just some data. These are some stats that they're showing, but then what that data means within context. So it's like, it's really the critical thinking part is what I'm more inspired to try to push more lately as I hit more and more like walls of understanding. Okay, this is why they didn't go and do that. This is why they see it that way. And even in addition to that, I didn't realize that there's some artists that have a lot of self-esteem issues, which is an interesting thing to deal with. That I can't really get too deep into it. This is not my personal my thing, right? I'm not Superman, but what I can do is try to encourage people to truly think critically, stop taking one person's opinion as gospel, right? And take their insights as something that you can apply and figure out if it fits for them. Because like you said, everything is not going to work for everybody. It's just not. But there's some blueprints that you can steal some shit for and figure out what life you want to live and figure out how you reverse engineer to get to your life,
Yeah, there's a hip hop artist that I work pretty closely with, this kid Drex Carter. He actually put me onto you, and he's tried like a million things over 4 years, and he's like, now he's got like 1 million streams a month on Spotify, and he's doing great, and he's got management, but that's after like a lot of trying different things. And he always says,
a lot.
He says, I don't try something unless I know that the person who told me about it did it and it worked. And if that's true, then I'll try it. But even then, he's tried 1 million different things. So,
see, yeah. And I have a very similar thesis. So, like, I get it. Like, it's just, you have to be able to go throughout that process. But what I found is, once you've done it in anything, really, like you start to become more comfortable doing it with whatever the other thing that you're trying, right? And you just remember it's a process. Like I launched whenever I launch something, I'll sometimes, well, not even sometimes, every time I pretty much get humbled, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, okay, I got this platform now. Maybe if I try to lead everybody to this Facebook page or this course or whatever it is, right? I could just do one post and now everybody will want to go check it out because it's awesome, right? And then it's like, nope, still got to do the work, still got to get in front of people 5 to 8 to 10, times. Like all that stuff still exists even after you have a platform, right? So like it's an interesting thing, and it doesn't stop. But once you get used to it, it becomes easier to just to wait it out and remember that this process does work. You have more certainty, so it makes it more easier to do. I guess that's a better way to say it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So who's out of like all the people that you've observed, like coming up, that you've studied, that you've documented, whose push do you admire most out of 2019?
Yeah, I've been actually telling a lot of people this lately. It's Megan Thee Stallion. Yeah, just because, right, the difference between her and let's say Lil Nas X, right? Lil Nas X had this one massive, pretty much unduplicable, I messed that word up horribly, right? Hard to duplicate song, right? In instance time, blip in the matrix, right? And then even if you look at Cardi B when she happened, that was still, well, of course she had the personality, built that social platform, but she still had a song that really caught and took on. Megan Thee Stallion's journey had been, although she's blown up a lot this year, it's still very steady. No super, super, super hit songs, right? And then there's all these brand activations that are happening at the same time, where them branding the fact that they repost fans on the bio. Like a lot of people repost fans in stories, but calling it the hot girl cam, right? So now if I'm a girl going to school, I'm like, yo, I'm on a hottie cam today, right? I'm on a hottie cam today. Like just branding small things like that, paying attention. They really pay attention to detail. If you like look at the small things they've done, the Hottie Ranch, just like a Hottie beach party, her flipping from Hot Girl Summer to Hot Girl Semester, and like all these like small things that's
her brand is Hot Girl.
That's her what? Yes, it's Hot Girl is her brand. Essentially, like there was Hot Girl Summer for everybody. That was a huge thing. A Hot Girl Summer and a City Girl Summer, but really it was to be honest, the hot girl thing was probably what won out, and she owned it. I mean, now to this extent that now she has it trademarked, right? And
Wow.
and corporations were starting to use it. Like I can't remember a specific company, but let's just say somebody like Brewster's and Starbucks, like companies like that, started to use it for their target marketing because it became that strong. So she's just been an interesting artist to watch because she has so much of the package. I understand that people can say, "Oh, she just has sex appeal," but I really hate when people try to deduce any artist's success to just one like random thing, because I think that's just not understanding all the work that goes behind it, even outside of the artist, like literally the team and all these other pieces that just have to fall into play, and even just timing that's necessary oftentimes, even if you have the perfect execution. But yeah, it's been really interesting to watch, and she's just she actually seems like she went through artist development. That's the part that really gets me. Like if you watch like her interviews and stuff where people can ask her off the wall crazy questions or just certain things come, the way she handles it is just like she's a vet almost. You know what I mean? So it's been interesting to watch her from so many levels, so many angles. Personally, DaBaby's a close second.
Tell me about that.
DaBaby is like a second coming of like Buster / Luda, like that whole thing, right?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
like he's this generation's that with the comedy. He has his own sound and whole own vibe, and the fact that he's been able to continue to ride those waves. Yes, he's had the volatile instances outside of his music, which I acknowledge, and that brings back attention, but I don't think it ever superseded. Well, no, I'll take that back. There were moments where it probably superseded some people in terms of the music. It became more about some of that stuff to some people who knew him, but ultimately he's won out, and he's been able to flip that into a legitimate artist career that's not about, I don't know, shooting somebody, or am I fighting somebody? Am I breaking some random thing in a hotel?
Right.
That whole type of brand. He's managed to take that, and the fact that they've been able to take that and keep it focused on the music somehow, and just the quality of like the videos and the way he's approaching it, with being that guy, because that's the interesting thing as well. Yes, he is kind of that more street artist if you want to go real life, but his music isn't exactly that. And then his videos, like it's been a while since you've seen a guy that's more of a street-ish type brand, or that's what kind of people look at him as, but still have like so much comedy and that type of energy, right? And I think that's why it plays so well, and he's having such of a boost, right? There's always these repeatable voids if you wait a certain amount of years that exist in the marketplace. You hate to productize, right? The artistry in that way, but people have patterns, history, like it's all patterns, and when certain voids exist, then somebody can fill that void. They might do it in a different way, but it's still something that wasn't there. And then once somebody, and I think that just was there a long time, and no one was thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about it for sure. And I'm like, but he makes sense when you observe it enough. He still makes sense.
Yeah, that's dope, man. I will definitely have to check out do you have content on both those artists?
I did. I have a few videos on Megan Thee Stallion. I said I was going to do one on DaBaby. I don't think I ever did one. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I didn't do one, but I said I did a video saying Megan Thee Stallion would blow up probably 6 to 8 months before. I can't remember the exact time, but yeah. So I know whatever I said about that video, I'm sure there's a little bit of insight in that one for sure.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So where can people find you if they want to get involved?
Oh man, just BrandMan, BrandMan, BrandMan. Just check out the YouTube channel, man. And if you like the content there, then you can hit me up on other platforms that it mentions, just to get some more insights and things of that nature.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Creative Juice, man. I'm going to continue to be a fan. I watch all your videos, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime in the future, man.
For sure, man. I appreciate you having me, for real.
Absolutely, man. Go check out BrandMan's YouTube channel and definitely, just dive right into the videos. I've had a blast watching them, and we'll see all of you indies next week on Creative Juice.
East Coast, West Coast, say what?